So now we have 2 pieces that each have 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 of the same exact pattern piece. The next step we're going to do, with the right sides together, pattern on the inside, we're going to sew this seam right here. If you feel like it helps to put pins in it, especially if you're starting out, you can put pins in it if you want to keep the fabric in place. I feel like the fabric, this kind of fabric, stays in place pretty good, but if you're feeling self-conscious about it, you can pin it like this, or you can pin it along the seam like that if you want to go over the top of it. So we're going to do that for both. We're going to sew here, and then we're going to sew here, making sure these are together right around here. Okay, so now we're ready to sew that first seam. Again, we're going to sew right along here. I have my right sides together. I like to sew as close as I can. I back stitch everything so that the seams don't come out. You can make the seam a little wider if you need to. All it will do is make the, it will just make the mask slightly smaller, which is fine because there's small kids too. So if you feel like you need a wider seam, that's fine. And we're going to do the second one. Okay, so now we have both of these. They're together with the seam on both of them. So we're going to turn one of them. I'm going to turn it like that. And we're going to do right sides together again. So there's a seam here and a seam here. And we're going to line them up so that it's matches up pretty good. Sometimes it won't be exact depending on whether or not your seams were, you know, exactly the same. So we're going to do that. You can take a pin and pin it if you'd like. You can pin it all the way around to the other side. It'll help the fabric from not moving. Again, if you're more experienced, I don't pin them. I think it takes a lot of time, but if you're worried about the fabric slipping, then certainly go through and pin it. So basically what we're going to do is, now that it's together, we are going to stitch this side all the way. Can you see that? Sorry. We're going to stitch this side all the way, and we are going to stitch this side all the way. And we are going to leave these ends open. This end and this end are going to be open because that's how we're going to turn it in right side out. So now it's time to stitch them. Again, yours can be however wide you need your seam to be. So it might look a little different than mine. Just depends on how much seam allowance you give. Again, I always back stitch just to make sure it doesn't come undone when we're manipulating the fabric later. because I don't have any pins, I like to keep a hold of my fabric really good. When we get to the corner, I just make sure it's all in place still. Down to the end, back stitch. Okay, now one thing that I do is I don't cut the thread in between, only because I feel like it's faster. There's the pin if you want it. I'm going to take the pin out. So just make sure it's lined up really well. And we're going to come back in here. Same thing. Back stitch. This I kind of have to get around this hump, I like to try and lay it flat. And I'm just laying this part flat so it doesn't get a bump in it. I'm going to check to make sure my seams are still in spot. Once you do a few of these, it's a lot faster. You don't have to check things so much, but I'm trying to show you. Okay, so now what we have is this, and it has two holes at each end. So I usually go through and cut my strings off. Okay, then I take this and turn it right side out. So once you've done that, your seams are nice and in place. And then what we do next is we're going to iron these flat. Makes it so much easier to sew if you iron it, and then you're not messing with it the whole time. Okay, so we're back up over at the ironing board. I like to kind of try and get the seams out as best as I can ahead of time. So I kind of just get my fingers in there and pull on those seams so that they lay flat. And then take the iron and press that seam down. Flip it around. Do the same thing on the other side. Move that over. Sorry, my fingers are in the way. Maybe I'll raise the this a little bit so you can see better. So once you have it like that, it's nice and flat and pressed. That way when you sew it, it doesn't move around on you. So then we are going to take these sides and prep them in. So I just turn them in with plenty of room in the allowance, because the pattern, I'll show you, remember the pattern has all this room in here. So you can use as much or as little as you want of that. The pattern originally calls to do this and fold it over so there's a hole in there, and then you stick it through. But I feel like there's an easier way. So what I do is I fold down the seams, and if you fold less or more, it just makes the mask a little bit bigger or smaller, so it's not really a right or wrong way. So we do that, and then we press it. Always press them because it's so much easier. Now I don't have to pin it because it's not going to go anywhere. It's hard to move around. We're going to do the same thing with the other side. Again, however much room you want to do. I try and make it similar, you know, both sides. Okay, so now it's in so that when I stick my elastic in there, it's already folded over. And so when we stitch this closed, it will have a nice seam. First we'll cut the elastic. I use between 4 and 5 inches depending on if I'm doing like a child or a adult. So each one of these squares is an inch, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can do 5 inches. I'm going to do a little bit less because it's the little tiny guys. So 3 to 4 year olds, or so we're going to go 4 inches. 1, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go halfway, 4.5. And then I'm just going to make them the same size. You could also do it, excuse me, you could also do it with this thicker elastic, and it will just be a thicker thing. Okay, so we are going to put the elastic in on the sides. It's going to end up looking like this, where there's one in, and then we stitch across. So I'll show you how we do that. We take the elastic that we have, and okay, so we're going to stick this in here. I'm going to stitch along here, and then after you get a little ways down, then I'll put the other one in. You can pin it if you'd like. Oops. By taking pin and pinning it in place. If that makes it easier so that you feel a little more comfortable, you can pin it in place. Pin both in place if you'd like. Show you kind of how I do it. So I just stick that in there. The needle down, push up the foot, open it up a little bit and stick it inside, and then lower the foot and continue back stitch. So now it's pretty much done when you look at it. Some people will put a wire in here before they stitch it close, and they can stitch around it. You can certainly do that. I don't think it's necessary on this style all the time, so I'm not going to do it this time. But then, so that it can be done just like this. I usually go in and top stitch around because I like them to not get all bunched up in the wash, because when you don't top stitch it, it can come out like that. But it's perfectly acceptable this way. I just like to take the extra minute, a couple minutes, and top stitch it. So I'm going to do that really quick, and then after that, then the mask is finished. second, please. So this one's actually reversible. That's why I kind of like to do 2 colors, because they can use the cream colored side one day, wash it, and then use the pink side however they want. So that's kind of where we're at. Nice and sturdy. They wash pretty well. We use these ones at our house, and they're pretty good.